Abroad at the moment, and it's not surprising that
I think you're on mute, John, if you're trying to talk.
Sorry. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ray. So I suppose, first of all, folks, thanks very much for joining us here this evening. My own name is John Brennan. I work for the Munster Council GAA. Also with us here this evening, you have Ray McHugh, a Monaghan man who's going to be presenting the content on the Chairpersons Officer Training. Just before we start, I'd just like to make you familiar with a couple of functions here in Microsoft Teams. Up on your top right-hand corner, you'll see there's a big red button saying Leave. Just in from that, the fifth icon into the left from that is a little hand option. If you have any questions during the seminar, if you press this button, we'll be able to see your hand is raised and come around to you for a question. Alternatively, just next to this on the left-hand side is the chat function. If you click the chat function and put a message into the chat box, we'll also be able to see this here, and this encourages better engagement throughout the seminar itself. I would ask each individual to mute their screens throughout the seminar. If you have a question, once your hand is raised or in the chat box, you'll be able to unmute yourself and we'll bring you in incrementally throughout the session. I suppose one or two final things just to know, folks, that the officer training here this evening will be recorded for promotional purposes afterwards. We'll also be putting it on the website, the e-learning website, and we'll have a feedback option at the end of this as well, along with a Q&A session. without further ado, I'll pass you over to Raymond, who's going to start now on the content side of things for chairpersons.
Good morning, John. Agus G ba cardi gair agus we're geared for Chickagy on Crinu shot the Stiha. She Ach Galore, Ach Dusa, I'd say it's Ach Galore, Deisha Freshen. As John said, my name is Raymond McHugh and my club is the Castleblaney Fogs in County Monaghan. I always start this presentation by saying it's one of the most important things that has happened to me in my life was to be born into this club, and I could imagine that for you as chairpersons of your own club, it's a very important part of your life also. I've had the pleasure of delivering this presentation throughout Ulster and North Leinster over the last 4 to 5 years, but never in my wildest dreams would I have ever expected or thought that we'd end up delivering like this. But such is life, isn't it great that we have a facility like it to do this? What I have found each day as we went out to deliver this presentation, what I found is that the chairpersons who attended learned far more from each other than they did from me or from the presentation that I delivered. Chairpersons were always very willing to share their experience and their knowledge of our beloved association. And what I hope is that this evening, limited and all as the facility that we have is, I hope that we will be able to share. And as John mentioned, the SNAT, the hands up or the chat box, we will use both of those quite a bit during this evening. Normally during this presentation, there'll be quite an amount of group work. We're obviously not in a position to do that. So if you wouldn't mind just having a pen and paper at hand, because what we go through, or what we hopefully as we go through tonight's presentation, we're going to offer you a chance as a new chairperson just to reflect on your role and what you want to bring to your club over the next year. And if you wouldn't mind just in the chat box, if you wouldn't mind just typing in your name, the number of years that you have been a chairperson, or if you're a newly elected chairperson, and the name of your club. So we'll give you a couple of minutes just to do that. It's just a way to introduce ourselves, and it's great to see so many people, well over 50 people here. So in the chat box, please, if you wouldn't mind, just your name, your club, and how many years you have been in the position, or if you're just newly elected. Thank you. It is very interesting to see so many newly elected chairpersons, and congratulations on your new election, and best wishes in your role. It's great also, and this is another change that has happened in the last number of years, is that we have members from the LGFA as well as handball and camogie joining these chairpersons meetings. Okay, we can just hold it there. So it's obvious that we have so many members at tonight's gathering. So many of you have just taken on the role, and as I said, I wish you well. And hopefully, we will learn a little bit about the role. Hopefully, we will learn from each other. And I see that there are some people here who will have the experience of being in position for the last number of years, who may be in a position to help with some of our discussions later on. The next thing I'd like you just to type in, and briefly if possible, why did you take on this job? A slightly more difficult question than the previous one. Okay, thank you for that. And it is so obvious that there's a common thread running through a lot of the replies that we have here. Love of club, love of place, challenge, looking to drive change in the club, to get involved, to give something back has come up a number of times. I've seen this before, saw this actually a lot last year, in early stage of last year, because there was no other candidate. And because they want to make something available for the children in their area. All very noble and very good reasons to get involved. But you haven't taken on this job and you haven't taken on the role of chairperson lightly. I'd say very many of you know the role itself, what it will entail, and the work that will be involved for yourself. We just move the slides forward there, please, John. Okay. In tonight's presentation, what we're going to look at is what a well-run club looks like. We're going to take a look at your role as chairperson. We're going to take a look at one of the areas mentioned by a number of people in the chat box. How can we make our club better? How can we get people involved? How we manage meetings, the club constitution, and the supports that are available and the information that's available to newly elected, or to not just to chairpersons, to secretaries, etc., to people involved in clubs throughout the country. Okay, well, the next slide is a very simple jigsaw, and maybe on the piece of paper that I asked you to take out, if you take a look at the jigsaw that makes up a club, and all the pieces that come together to make up a club, starting with a club constitution, which we are mandated to have. If you wouldn't mind just jotting down yourself on the piece of paper that I asked you to take out, what do you feel yourself makes up a good club? The parts of the jigsaw that you feel are required to make up a good club. Now, what we would usually do in this situation, we would work in groups of 5 or 6, but we're obviously not in a position to do that. So just yourself for two minutes or so, just what you think is required to make up a good club, or what a good club consists of. Okay, would anybody like to actually unmute and come in and maybe fill in a couple of these pieces in the jigsaw? I see Dara he's started us off by saying a good committee, absolutely essential. So if you're welcome to unmute and come in and speak to that, Dara, if you would like, or if anybody else would like to unmute and come in and speak just to this jigsaw, what will we put on this jigsaw to describe a well-run club?
Good facilities.
Facilities, absolutely.
Interesting people involved with a love of the sport.
That's a very interesting statement in itself. Interesting people with a love of the sport.
Sorry, interested people.
Oh, sorry. My interested people. Excellent. Yes.
Knowledge of the sport.
Excellent.
Coaches.
Sorry, I missed that. Was that social?
Coaches.
Coaches. Very good. Yeah.
Financial stability.
Excellent. There's no club in this country, I feel, that hasn't got that as an issue that has to be addressed.
There's a good coaching structure.
Would you take that a bit further beyond coaching structure and maybe even just using one word from that line?
Just good coaches.
Yes. Good coaches and a good coaching structure is a good way of putting it. But what about club structures? And we will touch on structures later on in the meeting.
Members.
Excellent.
Good communication.
Communication is that just within the club, or does it go beyond that?
I think it's in general across the playing and I suppose the officers and the committee really.
And what about in community?
Yeah, it's true. It's getting
Supporters.
Yeah.
Players.
Has to be in there.
Good leadership and teamwork.
Supporters.
So, Rachel, can I ask you just to comment on plan on process with committee?
That's more with the committee that comes in has to be working together with teamwork, and you need to have, it's with anything, it's you could even treat it as a, and I know probably everybody's going to argue with me, but it's like a project, so you have to have a process, so have a plan.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
so that's really important.
Just I referenced your comment there because it's something we're going to broach on later on, and maybe you might come back in on that later on if you wouldn't mind. Just the whole world of planning.
Yeah. Okay,
thank you. Okay, so everything we've mentioned there is integral to a well-run club and what a well-run club would consist of. We're going to start now. We will look at, first of all, your role as a chairperson, and your role as a chairperson involves a myriad of different things, like chairing club executive meetings. There are a lot of people who end up in the role of chairperson. This is one of the things that I find very interesting. Speaking with newly appointed chairpersons, they didn't realise how difficult chairing meetings actually became, and how the politics of the GAA, and the GAA is a very political organisation, as we all know, and the politics of the club could impact on how effective these meetings were. That the chairperson had to ensure that the club's affairs are managed effectively, that the club chairperson has to uphold the rules and the policies of the club itself and the association. And maybe later on we just might take a look at the rules of the club, that's your own club, and the importance of your club constitution. The fact that the chairperson represents the club as a very important part of the community. I don't know about your communities, but in my community and throughout Ulster, when a GAA person passes away and we have the GAA funeral, the person who stands at the front of the Guard of Honour is the chairperson of the club. I can imagine that that's the same throughout Ireland. And something that Rachel has mentioned there is developing a shared vision and a plan for the future of the club. And planning for the future of the club is such an important part of our role, or your role as chairperson of a GAA club. If we're just to briefly look at this photograph here, and again in the chat box, is there anything stands out, or what are the common tasks that you would associate with some of the photographs here? The word people is very important there, Patrick, because there's people in every single one of those photographs, working with people, yes. I don't know if this photograph here, is there anything strikes you about this photograph here? Money, very good. Engagement, active engagement.
Sportsmanship, good sportsmanship.
Yes. Which photograph are you referencing there?
Bottom right.
Bottom right. Who's the chairman?
I'd imagine the guy on the left.
I think you're right. Can I just ask you to take a look at the photograph to the left of that? What's happening there?
Analysing the game.
That's
communication, I suppose, number one.
Yeah.
Engagement, possibly with a parent.
It's a number of different things. Apparently, that photograph was taken at a funeral. It's just the former chairperson of Tyrone County Board. But it's inclusive, respect, enjoyment, smiling, or the fun, engagement again, love of each other. All of these words again gives us a flavour about the of the role. That it's not just about chairing meetings. That there's so much involved in this role that you have taken on. As we said, and as we know, this is a very, very complex role. You're involved in making presentations. We spoke about planning, so you may have to go to the local council to make a presentation with regards to the development of a pitch. We spoke about chairing meetings. I personally believe that a chairperson of a GAA club is all the time negotiating, all the time speaking with people. Go back down to the next line, or go down to the next line, we talk about motivating people, affirming people, monitoring everything, being a sort of an eye over everything that's happening, being out and about, consulting with people, planning, organising things, getting things up and going, challenging people, talking to people, managing conflict. Is there one word seems to flow through all of these little tiles that are forming part of that slide there? The one really important word that comes with all of those tiles.
Leadership.
Yes. Communication, correct.
Positivity.
Yeah. Anything else?
Personality.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would the word people fit into a lot of those tiles? Because we're dealing with people all the time, and there is absolutely no way any one of you would have taken on the role of chairperson of your club unless you were comfortable with people, comfortable working with people. But just looking at that slide there, again, if you'd like to unmute, and if you'd like just to address the nearly 60 of us here tonight, briefly on which of those you feel is the most difficult for a club chairperson. So I'll open this section of the meeting to the floor.
Managing conflict.
Would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, it's you want to have everybody on side, and everyone has an opinion, and everyone's opinion is valid to them. So, you know, you don't want to be taking sides either. So if one person has seeing one side of the fence and the other seeing the other side of the fence, there's obviously going to be some sort of conflict there, like, you know, so to be hard to get your point across in a fair way that way.
Yeah. And what's the danger of managing conflict?
Taking sides.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Anybody else like to speak on what they feel would be the most complex element of the role? Or maybe would you like to say, maybe is there something missing there? Is there one of those tiles that where the question mark is there something else we could put into that?
I think monitoring everything would be difficult.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in a club, and particularly if you have a dual club, or you know,
yeah,
that's how do you ensure you keep the finger on the pulse of everything?
Yeah. And maybe later on we might look at that. It's absolutely correct that monitoring everything is a very, very difficult thing to do. Anybody else like to speak to this?
I think being available, because if you're the club chairperson, you're the face of the club, I suppose. So it's a big undertaking as well, that you have to be available for different people at different times.
Yeah. And what are you available for?
I suppose everything that's on this list, in a way.
That's correct. That's correct. Or maybe you could even come away from the list, and maybe we are expected to be available for everything. Is that a problem in itself?
I think delegation would be very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the issues there. There's so much on the slide. It's impossible for any one person to do all that effectively. And it's important to be able to delegate specific roles to specific people that's on the committee with you.
Yeah.
And I think this is why we see a lot in volunteer associations, a lot of burnout. That's because correct. People take on too much.
That's correct. Could I ask, sorry, there's no names coming up. Is that Peter, is it?
James.
James, sorry, James. Yeah. James, are you newly elected, or have you been?
Yes, yeah.
Right. Could I ask just anybody who has been in the position of chair for more than a year, if they'd like just to address the group here this evening and maybe say what, in the period of time that they have been involved as chairperson, what has been the most difficult thing in their role, the most difficult element of their role?
This is Noel here. I suppose.
Hi, Noel.
Hi. It's dealing with conflict, and you're dealing with local people, probably friends of yours, neighbours, even family. So it's a fear of, I suppose, eventually maybe falling out with these people. You're not trying to, obviously, you're trying to do the opposite, but there is a fear there, you know, and the longer you're in it, the longer the fear goes on, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Is it a fear of upsetting people?
Yeah. As the previous speaker said there, you're not trying to take sides, you're trying to be impartial, but it's very difficult. Some people are, you know, very strong, opinionated, and that's fine, but, you know, it can go against you, like.
Would you have advice then for newly appointed chairs?
Yeah, I think it's very important to try and stay in the middle, not to take sides, as much as you can. You know, our own club here, we had a big decision to make lately, and you know, you try to stay down the middle. It's difficult, but have to really.
Yeah, somebody has described Christopher one time as that middle of the road he was going to get knocked down. Is that something that we should be cognizant of or wary of?
I think so.
Yeah. But,
I think that just Shane here, sorry, that I kind of think you can't stay really in the middle, especially when there's big decisions. You know, if your plans are in place and if you have a goal that you need to get to, then yes, you can seem to be in the middle, but you can push people in the direction that you want to go. I think you have to do that in order to get things done in a lot of cases.
If we're just looking at this slide here, if you're looking at, and it's something mentioned earlier on, was the just planning, and maybe if we go to what was mentioned then with regards to a major decision the club had to take. If we take that first line, you see the role of the chairperson and how important it is there in managing or making the presentation and chairing the meeting, negotiating. That the chairperson really has an important part to play in driving decisions forward. I know we want to try and bring as many people with us as is possible, but sometimes we have to get off the fence and we have to drive a project forward. And that is something, again, that we will come to in a moment. So thank you to everybody who contributed to that slide, especially to those who have been in the position for a while. And hopefully we're not putting people off who've been newly elected, not putting them off their new job. This is certainly one thing that can put a person off their new job, and that's the whole area of child safeguarding. And it is one of the areas that the GAA has really excelled in the last decade or so. But as far as you as chairperson is concerned, you know that child safeguarding, it's governed by legislation, and it is your responsibility to ensure that the safeguarding codes, the policies and the procedures, that they're in place, and that they are there to ensure, in so far as is practicable, that the children who play with our clubs and for our clubs, that they're safe. And I think if we keep that in mind at all times, that what we must always try to do and always try to ensure is that the kids who play with us are safe. I think if that drives you as a chairperson, I don't think you'll make a mistake, but it's important that we follow the guidelines and that we know the legislation. And I'm not going to go into this in detail this evening because there is a slide available, or so information available with tonight's presentation that John has made available to you, or will make available to you, and it will outline your roles. I'm quite sure that you know your roles. I'm quite sure that you understand your roles. And I'm also sure that if you have an issue with regards to child safeguarding, vetting, etc., that in the first instance, your own county board, and in the second instance, Crow Park, if need be, will be a tremendous help. But just to remind you that as chairperson of your club, you are the DLP, the designated liaison person, and that there are significant responsibilities with that. So just some of the things that you need to update is you need to adopt your club safeguarding statement. You need to complete your child safeguarding risk assessment and have it available to be inspected and viewed by anybody at the club, prominently displayed at your club. You notify your county committee of your club's children's officer and the children's officer contact details, and obviously the DLP, and that the DLP's name is on display. And if there is nobody else appointed DLP in your club, you know that you are the DLP, and in a very significant number of clubs throughout the country, the DLP is the club chairperson. Would anybody like to just to bring to the meeting any issues with regards to child safeguarding, or any comments that they'd like to bring, especially those who've been in a position for a couple of years, any comments that might help a newly appointed chair with regards to safeguarding?
It's Pat here.
Hi, Pat.
Just I suppose for new people that's coming in, I suppose as my own club, is get somebody involved that knows what they're doing. They know all the background of safeguarding and that, like, you know, get them involved in the club with you.
As the safety officer?
As a safety officer, yeah.
Excellent advice. Anybody else like to come in on that?
And just Peter Barry here.
Peter.
Again, just make sure that everyone has the course done, the child safeguarding course done. Anyone that's coaching kids, they cannot coach unless they have it done. It's simple as that. And just make sure that your officers are all trained up again as well with the courses.
Okay, excellent advice.
Which courses specifically are they? Sorry.
The safeguarding training. I think we could surmise maybe what the last two comments made by saying that it's really essential that as chairperson, you know that all your coaches are vetted, that all coaches have attended safeguarding training, and that all your coaches have a coaching qualification. It's a great comfort for any chairperson to know that those three areas are in place in your club. Anybody else like to bring a comment or a question? If you have a question, feel free to bring it. Okay.
Especially your child welfare officer is au fait with the whole child welfare area, and if they are up to speed and they're efficient in their job, takes huge pressure off your responsibilities, Chairman.
And I think it's also important that it is an item at every club executive meeting, that it's addressed, even if no issues have arisen or have been brought to the attention of DLP, that it is addressed. James, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, it's just in relation to the COVID situation and training. We've quite a few new people volunteering in our club in the last 6 or 7 months, and it's just a difficulty of getting them the safeguard training, and even we're going to have a turnover of coaches now this year as well, and getting people with the foundation coaching courses. I wonder, is there any possibilities of having something online for them? I know it's quite difficult, but...
John, can I call you in on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Ray. It's something that I can take note of, and I'm happy to bring that back. James, isn't it?
Yeah.
No problem. I'm happy to take note of that, James.
Yeah, particularly the foundation coaching course, because we need a lot of new coaches this year if possible, and just that's one of the worries they have, is how are they going to get the access to the training. Absolutely. Yeah. What I'll do, James, is I actually have your I'll get your email address off you if you wanted to put it in the chat, James. I'll put it in the chat, yeah. Grand, yeah.
just going forward on that last comment there, that's something I think that would go down well in most clubs, especially for the foundation course. If we could get something online, that would be great, because you could do a lot of people under the same umbrella, when you're doing your foundation course before the start of the season.
Absolutely. I know that there is work going on in the background, even on our own side here in Munster, on setting up a website and an e-learning tab in relation to coaching and games. I suppose this time with COVID has given us an opportunity to tackle them long finger jobs and provide better, I suppose, service at the end of the day. So that's something I'm happy to bring back, lads, for you.
And any other, any other courses that could be sort of put together to help people sort of, along their path, it'd be great.
Absolutely. What I'm going to do, folks, is I'll share a link at the end for the e-learning portal, and you'll see that there's 16 different modules uploaded onto it, and there's quite a range of topics there. So there is a lot being covered. Have a look at that, but coaching and games is definitely one where we could improve.
Cool.
And just following on from that, it's something we'll reference at the end, but we won't have time to take a proper look at the e-learning portal. It's only when you take a bit of time and go into the portal that you actually see how much is available. And it's too broad for one person to take on board. But if even the club executive itself was to take a look at what's available, that there are many, many elements of that portal which will be of benefit to every GAA club in the Congo. There's no GAA club who won't benefit from what is available. Just with regards to making materials available to the club, we will discuss at the end of this section. The third section that we're going on to now is taking a look at something that we're all trying to do as club leaders, and all that we can hope to do at the end of our time as club leaders is that we will have made some little difference to the club, that the club will be a little bit better as a result of our being involved. If we go back to all the areas that mentioned by club chairpersons at the start, now why did you get involved? And every single one of those areas are laudable. But at the end of your time, can you look back on your time as chair of the club, and can you say that as a result of my being involved in the club, that my contribution led to X or Y? So the next section is just taking a look at how we make our club a little bit better. And we mentioned action planning and planning earlier on. And the first thing we can do, and the first thing we have to do, is take a look at where we are now. Next thing we want to do is plan where we go to, and obviously how we get there. Now, could we go to the checkbox again, just out of curiosity, and could you put in anything, a yes or a no, just to put in for the clubs represented here tonight? There's over 60 clubs represented here tonight. How many clubs have a strategic plan in place? So it's just a yes, okay. Okay, well, it's obvious from the replies so far that we have an awful lot more no's than we have yeses. And we'll speak briefly about support that's available to clubs by Crow Park and from Crow Park to any club who would like to see or would like help in developing their plan. We see also that there are a lot of clubs with plans in development, and unfortunately the last year hasn't helped clubs who are working on plans and trying to develop their plans. So what we would normally do now is we would break into groups, and we would ask the groups to speak about successes that they have had with regards to club development planning. But what we'll do now is maybe if we just go back to you as an individual, as a newly appointed chairperson or recently appointed chairperson. What would you like to see with regards to club development? What would you like to see as that contribution that you have made? And we'll not say that we're not going to put you into your position of chairpersonship for perpetuity, say in 3 years' time, because this is going to be a difficult year. We know that this is going to be a difficult year, but hopefully by the end of the summer we'll be able to move on. So in 3 years' time, what would you like to see as the significant improvement that has happened in your club? If you wouldn't mind just writing it down just yourself or taking time just to think about it. Okay, with a number of key areas that our chairpersons want to get involved in, from strategy within the club to personnel development, not personal, but personnel, the development of their coaches, development of committee. We have a number of people looking at buildings and facilities and improving facilities. An interesting one that has come up a number of times, and this is one that would come up quite a lot if I was delivering this presentation in a number of counties throughout Ulster, is developing stronger links with the community. And it's something that we have always have to look at, is how can we develop stronger links within the community? Again, people development, player development, coaches, volunteers. So if we taking a look at the one that you have picked for yourself and the one you've written down for yourself, and again, there's no need to write this one into the chat box, but just take a moment or two just to see how do we get to that place? How can we get to the place that you will see the goal that you have set for yourself realized? What do you have to do to help see that goal realized? Okay, can I ask you just to park that for a moment? And after that, just maybe not huge goals like we have seen there, where we're talking about club development, etc., facilities development. Would there be two other things that you would like to have seen happen this year? The first year of your chairmanship or chairpersonship, is there something that you would like to see done this year? Just write it down. If at the end of this year, this goal has been realized, that you could say at AGM that I had set out to do X and X was achieved, what would that X be? Okay, so now we have a major goal that maybe 3 years down the line, and we have maybe more manageable goals that we would like to see at the end of this year. Would anybody like just to speak on those two goals, speak to the rest of us on those two goals, and just go back to something I asked you to do? How are you going to achieve those goals? Pretty difficult thing to be asking people to do. But anybody like to? What
I wrote down was about the teams field. Have a team for every division, you know, from under sixes all the way up to mothers and others in the football, and that would show that you're involved in the community. You're like, because you're attracting people in, and then there's a, you know, once you have a good fun element to it, you'll have all the kids there as well. And I think that'd show a good in 3 years' time if you have successfully managed to have a team in all age groups. You know, I think that would show that you have done a good job, like, you know, and you and your team, like, you know.
Yeah. How do you
and included, and it's about bringing people together, attraction rather than promotion. You know, for the kids, having the fun element in there rather than, you know, the serious side of it. You know, make sure that your coaches, they're all positive, they're all, you know, you're vetting them as well, like, you know, that, you know, the kids are going to enjoy their company as well, like, you know, because the kids now are going to be the kids of the future, they're going to be the teams of the future, like, you know, and it's about holding on to those kids the whole way through, because as you said, like, it is an honor to be in a club, and it is an honor to be in a position as well, and it's very hard, you know. I find sometimes you hear it from the coaches and the helpers and the COVID offers, like, people are just volunteers, like, you know, but you have to try and encourage those volunteers as well, like, you know.
Encourage them and develop them.
Yeah, yeah.
But go back to what you said, there's really no need for the under sixes to be running on the spot in the dressing room and then the door going out onto the pitch.
Playing take.
Yeah. Just on that, because it came up a number of times, so we want to make the club more open, more welcoming, and how do we, because we don't have an infinite number of coaches.
Yeah, I know it's sort of it's hard. All right, there's one word you have to take ego out of it. Like, you know, I find that there's a lot of ego around GAA clubs and most clubs, like, you know, and you know, it's my field and I'll plow it if I want to, like, you know. And the thing is to try and remove that and bring people together. And you know, in our own club here, you've hurling, camogie, and ladies football as well. And you know, that's where most of the conflict would come from. You know, who's getting the pitch and stuff like that. And communication needs to be a strong factor here. And not just the talking side, but the listening side as well. And that's the part that really needs to be drilled into several types of clubs, like, you know, that people start listening to each other, and everybody is a paying member in whatever club you're in, so you're entitled to your full entitlements, like, you know, and you know, especially under sixes to the seniors, you know, like, you know, they're entitled for their pitch time as well, like, you know. So it's all most conflicts can be resolved with communication, but that's both talking and listening, like, you know.
But if we go back then, so we have the facility sorted out, we have a timetable and a schedule, everybody knows when their time is, and then you have the poor under six coach, which in my experience is the most difficult job in the world, bar none. And go back to the ego and, you know, the difficulty that some people have going back to the GAA pitch. The child has seen football in school and wants to go, and mommy or daddy never put foot in a GAA grounds or into a GAA grounds. How do we get that mother or father who really, you know, is not comfortable there? How do we get them to help out in a coaching setting because they have something to offer?
You try and get them involved. You know, you ask them to come down and, you know, make them be a part of it. Like, you know, everyone should be welcome. Like, you know, once you pay your membership, you should be welcome. And, you know, but ensuring that you know, if they are getting heavily involved, that they have all the courses done.
Yeah, and it's welcome and involved. And our current secretary and the secretary of our club here, 2 years ago, and he wouldn't mind me saying, he wouldn't know whether the football was blown up or stuffed. He wouldn't have had a clue. He never stood in the GAA pitch in his life. Now he's the club secretary, and it's important that we make these people welcome and we get them involved. Can we come back? Just we're going to park that for a second. That's getting people involved. And can I just reference, because it was mentioned in the chat box, is a template for planning. Could I take it a little bit further maybe and invite you just to take, as a club, to take a serious look at what the GAA has on offer by way of the club planning programme. There is information available on it online, and what the benefit of the club planning programme is that the GAA will get other people involved in helping you develop your plan. Working with an outside facilitator who will, and we may have to do this year, I'm working with Enniskillen and another club in Fermanagh, and we will have to move to try and bring this a stage further because it died a death in the summer last. We have to take it a stage further, but we will have to use a facility like this next year to bring it to the next place. So, like, for what you will have to do as a club, it's very simple. You'll appoint a facilitator. The GAA will appoint a facilitator who will meet with your executive, put structures in place, meet with the membership, and this can be done. It can be done online. You know, it's become such a part of our day-to-day working life now that more and more people are more comfortable using Zoom or Meets or whatever, and it gives your club membership an opportunity in a structured way to have a say in how your plan can be rolled out or could be rolled out. The contact I have for club planning and facilitation of club planning is Jack McCarney, jack.mccarney@ga.ie, and John might take a look at that, and in some of the materials that we're publishing after tonight's presentation, we might just see if Jack is still the contact person for club planning, at central level. But it's worth considering, very, very well worth considering, even in these difficult times that we currently live in. Sorry.
Ray, John here, just on that point, you're actually spot on. Jack McCartney is still the national coordinator of the club and county planning. I myself am the representative at provincial level. In each of the counties, your development officer will be the first point of contact. So if you take the county of Cork, and forgive me now, folks, if there's change in officerships since the recent conventions, it will be the likes of Pat Horgan in Cork. I believe Pat has now gone in towards vice chairperson. So whoever has assumed that development officer role would be your first port of call within the county to source out a little bit of information and to flag it with the likes of myself and Jack as well. And we're happy to provide support. I suppose what as Ray has rightly pointed out, once you make contact and express interest, the association will provide a facilitator to your club. What they will do is come down and help and coordinate your team. They won't draft the plan for you, but they'll help you with tools and advice in how to get to the finishing point. But I suppose the real hard truths at the end of the day are within the club, and it's about changing or potentially improving the culture within the club as well. And only you at the cold face of it would know that what needs to be addressed in that situation, you know.
Yeah, and it's the sense of ownership that people have when they've been invited to get involved. Come back to the two words that were used earlier on. The welcome that was given to people to come and express their views with regards to the development of the club, the fact that what they had to say was valued, and the fact that they felt included and involved in the development of the plan. And the fact also that their name may be mentioned with regards to an action listed in the plan, and we'll talk about that later. There's nothing focuses the mind as much as an execution. It's one way of describing an AGM, because there's nothing focuses a chairperson's mind like an execute, an AGM. Excuse the Freudian slip there. I shouldn't have been calling it an execution, but AGMs definitely focus the mind. But at an executive meeting, when the plan is reviewed and progress on the plan has been reviewed, when the member of the executive has to speak on an element of planning, there is no doubt it makes things happen. That's just my experience with our own club plan here. And I spoke with John earlier on. GAA clubs throughout Ulster, as a result of the Club My programme, there are very, very few GAA clubs left in Ulster who don't have a well-developed and well-integrated club plan. It's just part and parcel of every GAA club's executive role and work up here at the moment. Now, the next one follows nicely on from what we've been speaking about, and that is the importance of getting people involved. Because, as you know, there is absolutely no way you are able to do everything in your club. And in the past, club chairpersons have tried to do everything. It's not doable. It's not good for your club. You and the small number of executive members that you have in your club can't do everything. You need the help and you need the support of your community. And community is a word that has been mentioned tonight a number of times, both in the chat box and in presentations made by people who are attending tonight's meeting, chairpersons who are attending tonight's meeting. But if we could say that a key responsibility for you as a chair is to get as many people working for you as is possible, working for you as chair, but far more important than that, working for your club. So if you could think for a moment, just whether it's by way of your club or by way of your place of work, how do you get people involved? Go back to the chat box again, if you'd like just to throw a couple of words together into the chat box. How do you get people involved? I think we have. Could I ask Patrick Ahern? Patrick, would you mind coming back in there just and speaking to the point that you put into the chat box there?
Yeah, look, I suppose you know, it's kind of an obvious one, and I think everyone has said it, but people need to be asked. And generally, most people in the community, deep down, people do want to help. They do want to be involved in something that's bigger than them and give to the community. And often people are maybe, they might be nervous about coming forward, or they mightn't think they have any relevant skills, but everyone has a relevant skill, whether it's from being an accountant or a physio or making sandwiches, or, you know, so being honest, being open, having a friendly demeanor and a positive attitude. And I think someone mentioned that they're assuring them that there's help available and they won't be left on their own. And it's not a lifetime job. It's, you know, assure them of, you know, it's limited hours a week and then X, Y, and Z. But being open, honest, friendly, and positive, I think, is key.
I just think, you know, that it's very important that, you know, if we leave tonight's meeting even with that message in itself, that we can't do this ourselves, we can't do this on our own, we can't run a club on our own, we need help. And the only way we're going to get help is by asking. And as you said, people like to be asked. And sometimes it's difficult, and it's particularly difficult when you know that the right person for the job is somebody that maybe you mightn't get on that well with, but you know that it is the right thing to do because they have the skills, as you said, to handle a task that the club needs handled. And as you said, to explain that there will be hurdles, but there will be help, and that there is help available, and that they won't be lumbered with this on their own. But I think if we leave tonight with the one message, and the message is that, look, we can't do this ourselves, we need to ask. Difficult and all, as some people find it to do, we have to ask people to get involved. An interesting point was made there with regards to asking former players. Is it difficult to get former players to get involved? Some people find, and some clubs find it difficult to get former players to get involved as coaches. But I think, come back to that simple message again, we need to ask, we need to invite. And I like what Michael is saying there, be organised. Michael, would you just like to develop that a little bit further for me, please?
Yeah, it's just that you know, asking is very important, but when you do ask and people do come down to the pitch to help out, like, you know, there's one of the guys that does the camogie for the young fellas, and you know, every training session you go to and help him out, that he's 100% organised. He tells you where your station is, what you need to do, how will you do it, you know, and you know, hats off to him. He's very good at what he does, like, you know, and that's what I try to take off of him, like, you know, it's his organizational skills, like, you know, everybody knows what they're doing.
Okay, I might just take that a little bit further with regards to asking the person that you want to ask to do a job. I just like the word organised there, because maybe you need to be organised in your head. How am I going to convince this person that he's the right person for the job? And it may not be a spur of the moment thing. It may need a little bit of organisation in your head as to how best to approach this person. If the person is the right person for the job, take time, organise your thoughts, organise the way you're going to convince that person to take on the role. But the next part is taking a look at, again, at club structures and the importance of how we get these people that we've invited along to help us in the management of our club, and the different committees and subcommittees that we have in our clubs. So could you take a moment, if you wouldn't mind, just taking a look at your executive committee, and then the subcommittees that you currently have in place. Just presuming that you have a board and OG, you have a games development and finance subcommittee. What other subcommittees have you in place? And just, if you wouldn't mind, just writing them down, please, in a similar sort of structure as is in that slide. Derek, would the coaching committee fit under games development, or is it different? Just to put when you're looking at the various committees that have been mentioned here, chairpersons may take a look at some of them as ideas for their own club.
Sorry, Raymond, I don't know if it's my screen here, but I can only see the slide making the club a little bit better. It's just stuck on that one for me.
Okay.
I don't know, is it the internet with me or is it the same for everybody?
Using subcommittees. No, it's, I don't know. John, could you check that for me, please?
If you actually click the right arrow down where it says the slide number, it'll move it along.
Yeah, I have to move with man as well. Yeah.
Okay, we have a number of committees, a number of different committees. There's actually committees now that we wouldn't have had in clubs 5 years ago. The Healthy Club Initiative has rolled out nationwide. I don't see a board in Gaelic mentioned yet. I have a question, and we'll not go to the chat box for this, but we can put our hands up. And the reason we're going to use hands up on this was to try and keep it as anonymous as possible. Would any club have experienced the setting up of a subcommittee that became a sort of an independent republic? I don't have one hand up yet. That's amazing. One. Okay, we have a few. I'd be happy to, for any of the people who raised their hands there, I'd be happy to allow them just to come in and speak on that if they'd like. Just let us know what type, or if they prefer maybe for me to guess, because I would have heard from one or two clubs as just in the last number of years where the independent republics, what they ended up being set up to do. Anybody like to come in on that?
Yes, Raymond, there. Just you hear me there?
I can indeed, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't get in them boxes there, but just as of my peace of mind, we have a subcommittee here, and I suppose the thing about subcommittee is to tell them they have to come back to the chair, to the main table with any ideas that they don't want a solo run.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the main thing.
Yeah, and the solo run is a problem. Just the experience that I would have had from listening to other chairpersons is the experience of the local team, the club team winning the FAILA competition and setting up a FAILA committee and raising a huge amount of money to bring the kids off to Fela, and problems arising regards to accountability, and as you said, not coming back to the executive committee to speak to the executive committee as to what's happening. It's very important that we remember that the executive committee is the most important committee in the club. It is the committee that directs everything that happens at club level. And it's very important that each subcommittee, and maybe it's something that you as a newly appointed chairperson may have to do, is to take a look at your at the structure, the club structures, who sits on executive committee, who sits on your board and OAK, who sits in the games development committee, who sits in finance committee, who are they accountable to, what structures are in place. So who, or is there a board and OAK representative on executive committee? I would expect that there is. Is there somebody on games development who sits on the executive committee? On the finance committee who sits in the executive committee, you would expect the treasurer does. But going back to what we spoke about earlier with regards to club planning, if at every executive committee a member of board and OAK has to speak on what happened with regards to board and OAK activities since the previous meeting, it focuses the mind. It, I suppose, gives the executive an insight into what's happening in every aspect of the club's work, and it also helps the executive feed information back to board to the board to board and OAK. John, I don't know if you can just, could you check that we're on slide 13, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. Right, there we are.
Okay. Just with regards to getting people involved and the delegation of work, first thing we have to do is we have to identify the task. Next thing we need to do is we need to identify people who are suitably qualified for the role or able to do the role. Again, a point that was articulated very well earlier, we need to explain the task clearly to the person that we have approached. We need to keep in touch with that person and offer any support that we have, that we can give to the person that we have delegated the task to. And something that we must do and must do all the time is we need to acknowledge a job that's well done. One of the things that we will all know is that in our roles as club leaders and in your work as club leaders, you will spend a lot of your time going around thanking people and commending people and acknowledging the work they have done. But don't go looking for a pat on the back yourself, because it's not going to come. So just take it as read that for the length of time that you're going to be involved as a club leader, you're going to be doing an awful lot more acknowledging and thanking than receiving. We all know that. We didn't get into this job to be lauded and to get pats on the back. We got into the job and we took on leadership roles so that we could see a vision through, a shared vision for the year, a vision that you and your executive share for the development of your club. Can I ask you just to go back now, if you wouldn't mind, to the notes that you wrote earlier on with regards to the 3 things that you would like to see done in your club during the next 3 years. That's the major task and the other smaller tasks, maybe the other short-term tasks. And if you could just, for yourself, and this is not going to be shared, for yourself, who could help you do this? Could you put a name of somebody down there beside that job that you want done or you need done? And could you write the name, one name, maybe 2 names of people who may be in a position to help you do that? And somebody that you would contact in the next week. And I'm going to give you 3-4 minutes to do that. So the name, somebody who's going to help you achieve the task, and a commitment to yourself that you're going to ask that person to help you with this, or you're going to discuss this task with them within the next week to 2 weeks. John, will you press mute all there, please?
Whenever you'd like to come back in, Ray, you can just unmute yourself again.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, maybe something that we might take a look at later on after we finish, but the 3 things you've written down there is actually 6 things, hopefully, at this stage. 3 key achievements for the year and the names of 3 people who will help you achieve those goals for the year. Okay, we're moving on to a key part of your work, and that's meetings. And what we would normally do is we break up into 2 groups, and we would discuss meetings, features of ineffective meetings and preparing meetings. We've all attended meetings that are ineffective. They didn't work. So if we go back to the chat box for a second, and if you'd like to throw in a word or 2 into the chat box that would describe an ineffective meeting.
Not prepared.
Correct. Oh, Peter Ryan isn't describing tonight's meeting.
No, all right.
Thanks a million, Peter. Right, I'm going to try and surmise just some of the points made there with regards to meetings. And Rachel has come in there again. Structure, time, no outcome, no agenda, long, rambling, inconclusive. Very good one there, mentioned a number of times, lack of engagement. I like the word roundabout. Describes meetings very, very well. Gone round and round and round, and we'll talk about that in a second. Again, roundabout, no conclusion, inconclusive. We've all attended these meetings, and we've attended meetings with difficult people at meetings. That was mentioned earlier on as well. Meetings that have been maybe taken over by members in attendance. So they're the features of ineffective meetings. We now look at tips for running an effective meeting. And there's no rocket science here, because I have absolutely no doubt that as chairpersons, this is how you run your meetings, because if you run your meeting using these as tips, there will be effective meetings. The first one, I think, is essential. If the meeting is supposed to start at 8 o'clock, it should start at 8 o'clock. If the meeting is supposed to finish at 9 o'clock, it should finish at 9 o'clock. And I think it's a courtesy, and it's out of courtesy to people who have agreed to come and give their time for the development and benefit of the club, that we don't waste their time. And inconclusive, roundabout meetings that are rambling and go on and on and on, it's a waste of people's time. And I don't, to be honest, feel that it's respectful for people to allow meetings go on and on. As chairperson of the club, you're in a position of authority. You have allowed your name go forward to help lead your club. You are entitled to respect, but you are also entitled to exercise your authority as chair. As chair of the meeting, if you call the meeting to order, the meeting should come to order. The next one talks about respect. That is the first element of the meeting. You've been treated with respect. If you're being treated with respect, the meeting will proceed and proceed in a manner which will lead, hopefully, to the effective administration of your club. But you will be treated with respect when you treat everybody who is at the meeting with respect. This next one is very difficult at times, and that's trying to keep the meeting on track. And that will come with an effective agenda and not deviating from the agenda. And something we mentioned earlier on, when people are speaking to their certain subcommittees' role and work, it should help keep the meeting on track. But if you don't keep the meeting on track, you are not going to finish on time. And I'll come back to this time thing again. If we say the meeting is going to take 1 hour or 1.5 hours, I think it's very important that you keep on track and that you finish on time. And if it means that you have to reconvene, then do so. The next issue is a problem with every committee, is the talkative, dominant member. How do we try to ensure that everybody has their say? How do we encourage the quieter member to contribute? I don't know about your experience of committees, but my experience of committees is the person who sits and says very little is taking an awful lot in, and is very often well able to surmise the discussion and maybe bring a discussion that maybe has dragged on a little bit, bring it to a conclusion. We go back again to how do we prevent discussions dragging on and on and on? And we've been at these meetings, every one of us here have been at these meetings, but how do we get a decision made? How do we get the meeting to make a decision? How do you manage the discussion, but you don't lead too much? And that was something we discussed earlier on. You know, as the club chairperson, we may want to get the committee to reach a position on a certain topic. How do we do that without dominating to the extent that people in the meeting are saying, well, my opinion doesn't count here? Do you adopt a neutral attitude and remain impartial? Or do you just come out at the start of the meeting and say, look, I think we have to do X, Y, and Z? That's for you as chairperson. That's going to be part of your management style. That is something that, you know, will develop over time. But as we said at the start of the meeting, sometimes you really have to nail your colours to the mast and you have to decide what side of the fence you stand on. Mobile phones. Anybody got an idea or a suggestion as to how mobile phones should be managed at meetings? We have two suggestions, and both of them have asked for the mobile phones to be turned off. That's the ideal situation. Sometimes people need them. sometimes it's difficult to get people to turn them off, but certainly mobile phones should be at mute or unmute. And I think it's very important that mobile phones are on silent. There's the word, that's the word I needed there. It's just come up in the chat box again. And yeah, that's it. PJ has come up with a point there. Sometimes mobile phones are needed actually for points of clarification. That may not necessarily be the chair, but a secretary might do that. Okay, now we're looking at actions. And again, if you have set a subcommittee a task, back to the agenda, I think agenda and particularly the minutes, an agenda can be long and rambling. Sometimes the minutes of meetings can be long and rambling. I think if you look at the materials available through the GA on the learning portal, you will see that the agenda is broken down and the minutes are broken down. What was discussed, what was the action, and who was to do it. So if we take the item, so we're looking at a new more, what's the action? Get a price for the new more, who does it, and when by. And that's all that's reported back at the next meeting. And I think, you know, not to be trying to tell you what to do with regards to how you set your minutes, but I think we need to look at the length of minutes, and we need also to maybe try and ensure that minutes are read before meetings start, because it's quite a waste of time at a meeting when you go into the meeting, you look at the agenda, agree the agenda. After agreeing the agenda, the secretary reads out the minutes. There's no reason why the minutes couldn't be circulated previous to the start of the meeting, and that the meeting could take the reading of the minutes, or the minutes as being read by everybody before they've come in. Matters arising is a different issue. Matters arising, I think, it has to be given time at the meeting. So, but I would take I would always try and ensure that everybody has access to the minutes before that. Now, there are obviously always going to be people who will have broadband issues, who will have ICT competency issues. Maybe they can be facilitated in other ways. But I think it's important just to expedite your meeting by trying to ensure that the key tasks like agreeing at the agenda is done beforehand, and the reading of the minutes is done beforehand. We'll deal briefly now with just some of the people that we encounter with at our meetings, and go back to the chat box again. If we take a look, first of all, we've spoken about the quiet one, and I think it's important to get the quiet member of the committee involved and ask their opinion. Can we go to the third one over there? The intimidating stroke angry member of the executive. Any suggestions as to how we deal with that person at committee? At committee meetings, I should say. If you want to unmute and come in to speak on it, or if you want to put it in the chat box, feel free to speak on it. Newly appointed chairpersons would be particularly interested in hearing from experienced chairpersons as to how they deal with the angry, intimidating person who comes to the meetings and drives us all bananas.
So, Graham, I'll come in there. A few years done. Look, if there's something coming up that you know is coming up for the meeting, maybe talk to that person before they come to the meeting and explain to them something that explain it to them what's going on and to keep it short.
So you doorstep them.
Well, yeah, if you meet him, yeah.
And you tell them it's coming up.
Well, yeah, some people knows what's going to happen. They know this person's going to come in and going to keep an hour talking. So we all know, but there's actually nobody saying it. So just go meet the chap. It happened myself, and it actually does work.
Yeah, it's good advice. And maybe during the meeting when he goes off on his tangent, that you may be able to say, well, look, we discussed that downstairs and I did explain that to you downstairs. Anybody else with advice on that? Brian, Mary has, I'd say Mary agrees with the previous comment. Brian, speaking times and place, would you like to just develop that?
Can you hear me?
Can indeed, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, so you just have kind of speaking orders in place in terms of if you're used to somebody who will ramble on and dominate the meeting, that at the outset of the meeting we tell everybody, okay, you know, you get a chance to speak for 5 minutes on a particular issue. Anybody who wants to speak on it, and then maybe a right to reply to others for maybe 3 minutes. And you know, it's a way of managing maybe an issue which is confrontational or that. So it just keeps everybody in line and gives people a chance to speak, but not to dominate.
Yeah, Tracy and Patrick have come in there. Brian has spoken on it as well. I think this is a point that maybe another piece of learning that we may take from this evening. It may be worth your while to consider the adoption of standing orders at the start of the year, so that you don't have to do it at the start of every meeting, but to take on board the points made by Tracy, Patrick, Brian, that a person has the right to speak. Everybody has the right to speak, but particularly on contentious issues, that we say, look, we need to make a decision here. We don't have time to be here all night. Put a speaking time on it. And one right to reply. If we go beyond one right to reply, you're there into this rambling issue that we spoke about earlier on. Sean, would you like to come in on that? Just Sean O'Sullivan.
I would think, okay, I suppose we've experienced this, you know, this type of behaviour before with people that, especially a person that's very, very angry at a meeting, okay, let him spin his wheels and just let him talk and talk and talk, and I think they will get the message eventually when they won't get support from the floor, okay? And don't ask the other members of the meeting to reply to whatever they're saying, and just at the end of it then to say, were you respectful to what you said? All these people here are volunteers, and hopefully the message will get through. But not to reply to them, I think. So
not to take the bait.
Not to take the bait, exactly. Yeah. I'm talking now about extreme behaviour there, okay, where you know, people are really getting out of order.
Yeah, has the chair the right, do you feel, Sean, would the chair have the right to suspend the meeting in light of the intimidating, angry behaviour of a member who's there?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would adjourn the meeting and, you know, maybe then have a word with this person on the quiet afterwards, but adjourn the meeting, yeah?
But actually, the word you've used there, Sean, is a far better word, because adjourning the meeting means that you could reconvene the meeting in 10 minutes. Suspending the meeting means it's a totally different thing. So maybe your word is a better word. Adjourn the meeting.
Yeah. You can adjourn the meeting, can't you, for days as such, can't you?
You could, but would 10 minutes work?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I suppose it depends how angry the person is.
Yeah. So sometimes they have to have their say, but you know, they are difficult, and they are difficult people to deal with at meetings.
I'm talking about extreme behaviour there.
Yeah, and it has happened, and it has happened. It happens, and it happens regularly, especially in something that is so dear to us all. Like our GAA club is dear to the angry person, the selfish person, the quiet person, and you know, there's nothing raises this feelings and the sensitivity more than how our clubs are developed or are perceived to be developing. Can I ask you about the overly agreeable one? And we have all seen these people at our meetings. Sean is on one side and he makes point X, and Mary is on the other side and Mary makes point Y. And when Sean was speaking, person C, this overly agreeable one, is nodding and nodding. It's like the party, those wee cows that animals used to be in the back of cars, so the heads go on and go on and go on and go on. Yeah for Sean. And then Mary, and when Mary's speaking, the heads go on. Yeah. What do you do? Anybody like to unmute and come in? What should the chair do?
Like if somebody is agreeing to both sides of the floor, if you want to put it that way, that's their opinion. You can't knock somebody for being like that. I know, you know, they mightn't have the courage to stand up to whatever side they want to, but you know, you can't knock somebody for being like that either. Like, you know.
Would you ask them what their opinion is?
You could ask them what their opinion is, but they're probably like that outside of the GA circle as well. That's probably their personality. You know, they probably do have an opinion, but they mightn't be strong enough to give their opinion. Like, you know, so it leads to begs to differ. Are they strong enough to be in a position on a committee if they're like that?
Yeah. Is there a tip that anybody would like to give for how the chair would deal with a very selfish member of the executive, somebody who knows it all, has seen everything, has done everything, has won everything, and just takes over? Anybody got a tip for that?
Yes, Sean O'Sullivan here again. I'd imagine that's up to the chairman, and if standing orders are adhered to, everybody has the right to speak. Like if this person is continuously speaking, you just go around the table and say, look, you like invite everybody to speak. If this person is continuously coming in, you just have to, I suppose, bring order to the meeting.
Yeah, yeah. It goes back to the word you made at the start there. Go back to your standing orders, and maybe acknowledge their contribution, thank them for it, as in their contribution to the meeting, but then ask other people to have their say. Derek is an interesting one there. Ask them would they like to have the chair. There's a very good chance they wouldn't like to have the chair because they wouldn't like the responsibility.
Sorry, before I mute my microphone, okay, just going back to the real angry person, is there any other way of, say, or what are the sanctions, or I don't think we like the word sanctions, but if we want to get everybody included, but what else could be done to, you know, if somebody's really out of order in the meeting?
I'm not going to say what you know, my experience, and I have experienced intimidation and, you know, angry people at meetings. I would acknowledge their position. Say, right, okay, I hear how you feel, but I would also say that not everybody in the room feels the way they do, and that, okay, you've had your say, we have heard what you've said, but there are other people here who would like to have their say also. And maybe it might go a little bit further, not that far off what you said earlier on, Sean, where we might have to say, look, I don't know if you've noticed at this meeting or at meetings, but when you speak the way you speak, or when you address the meeting the way you do, very few people will follow you, and very few people will actually make a comment other than myself as chair. And that might focus their mind, but that conversation might have to happen after the meeting or prior to a meeting. But if it doesn't work, maybe it might have to happen at the meeting. And that's one of the difficult positions that as club leaders we find ourselves in. Sometimes we have to make hard calls. Sometimes we have to say things that have to be said. I don't know if anybody else would like to add to that.
I think that's a very good answer. Right, I mute my microphone now. Thanks.
All right, just with regards to meetings, and just through the GA and other things, I attend quite a number of meetings, and one of the things that I find valuable with regards to meetings is trying to anticipate what's going to come up at a meeting, and trying to just get a feel for how people are with regards to certain issues that we're going to address. I think it's very important in the chair that you keep your emotions on check. Try not to get rattled. If you're rattled, try not to show it. Use the agenda as a focus. Bring the meeting back to the agenda. come back to the words used earlier on: engagement, inclusivity, trying to ensure that the length of the meeting is as it should be, trying to avoid a roundabout meeting. I think use the agenda. We have 6 more things to go through here at this meeting. Can we wrap up? Can we make a call on this? But I know there are many of you here have far more experience with regards to meetings and attending meetings than I have. They're just things that I would do at meetings. I would also use the car park, and it was mentioned earlier in the meeting as well by contributions from the floor. Sometimes prior to a meeting, you may have to speak to somebody outside. Before they go in, you may have to give them a chance to discuss X, Y, or a Z and say, look, I know such and such is coming up on the agenda. I know you feel about whatever, but my feeling on it is maybe slightly different to yours, and this is why. Is there anything that shouldn't be on the agenda? Would anybody like to put into the chat box just what they feel shouldn't be on the agenda? Doesn't have to go any further because Stephen Buttimer has answered it in 3 letters. AOB. I don't know how you feel as chairpersons on this. David very quickly in there in 2nd place. But AOB, I never have AOB on the agenda, ever. AOB, any other bombs, any other BS, there's lots of other things that it can be called, but it's something that I would avoid at all costs. So if we go back to discussion we briefly had with regards to the setting of an agenda for meetings, everybody should have an opportunity to put something on the agenda. So if your secretary is involved in setting the agenda, the secretary may set out or send out the initial agenda and invite from members of the executive, invite them to add an item to the agenda. But I would insist that if you add an item to the agenda, that you lead the discussion on that area. That will focus people's minds with regards to the number of items that they add to the agenda, because remember, we have only a certain amount of time, but it also enfranchises your executive members with regards to what's discussed. So no AOB, but you are not disenfranchising your members by saying you can't bring an item to the meeting, because they've been invited by the secretary to add any item that they want to the meeting. Anybody else, especially the former chairpersons, anybody else, like, just before we wrap on meetings, is there anything that just like to bring as advice to other chairpersons? Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, Raymond, just to confirm there, you said if they come back with feedback and add an item to the agenda, you'd ask them to lead that discussion on that particular topic?
I would, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Would you feel that there'd be a problem with that?
No, I agree, yeah, as you said, completely agree that it focused their minds, so yeah, I agree on that completely.
The other problem, or the reason I would say that is because if you say to the executive, right, you can put whatever you want to put onto the agenda, put it on it, and then they go to the meeting and they expect you to lead it, as you invariably end up having to do, and maybe you become accountable for gripes that are happening around the town or around the community with regards to the club, where these bombs are coming from outside into, it's if once it's added to the agenda, you have a chance to get a feel for it, and it just, even just to get your own mind focused on it, it's better, I feel, just to let somebody else, if they want to bring it up, let them lead the discussion on it. Okay, I just see there's quite a few people have agreed with the AOB and no AOB. Just any advice on frequency of meetings? I'll open that to the floor. Anybody feel how often the executive should meet? Or maybe for those who have been in the position of chair, how often did you meet? Like last year is a disaster. It's virtually impossible to gauge how frequently a meeting meets, or how frequently a club should meet.
Once a month, Raymond, we normally do.
Okay. Now, would that be during the middle of the summer as well?
Well, maybe July and August will be different, maybe, all right. They'll be holidays.
Okay.
But not once a month, just keep things on the right track.
Okay, so it seems to be once a month for executive meeting. And would you insist that the subcommittees would have met once or more between each executive meeting? It's maybe something just for consideration by yourself. I don't know whether it's the story down in Munster, but in Donegal, but they do things differently in Donegal anyhow. An executive meeting, a club meeting is open to everybody, and invariably their executive meetings end up open to the whole club. Now, try doing business in that environment. I don't know, is that, I don't know, John, is that the story in Munster, or executive meetings for the executive members?
Usually what you'd have is the executive would meet once a month. In relation to subcommittees, it would depend on the activity ongoing. Normally what would happen in most cases is subcommittees would come in and present to the executive at certain times during the year to keep them updated on projects. But say, for instance, if it was a facilities or development project, that might be more pressing and information is more wanted on a monthly basis or whenever they're meeting up.
Okay. Thanks for that. Could you just bring up the next slide, please, John? It's on the Constitution. And we're almost finished. You'd be glad to hear, folks. But I think it's very important before we finish that we mention this document, and it is quite frightening when we bring it up. It's quite frightening, the number of chairpersons who don't know about this, don't know whether their club has a constitution, don't know the importance of it, don't know what it covers. It's not a very long document. I'm not going to ask you to put a hand up or whatever, you know, has your club got a constitution? Because the answer to it has to be yes, your club has a constitution. There is a template available. The only way to change the club constitution is with the acquiescence of your county board, but your club can add to the constitution, as many of you would know, at an AGM. But it is very important that you as chairperson have an understanding of the club constitution. It's a very important document even to have on the desk or in front of you at a club meeting or at an AGM. Because if things are heading off in a tangent with regards to areas of discussion at club level, you might find that your knowledge of the Constitution might help steer things back in the direction that may be more in line with your thinking and maybe more in line with what is possibly better for your club. As I said, it's available online. If your club does not have a club constitution, you download it, you adopt it. It's supposed to be adopted every year at your AGM. I'm not that sure when you read it if you will feel there is a need to add very much to it, because it covers quite a significant, well, it covers every aspect of the club. It'll cover, and it does cover, you know, things like how executive meetings are run, fees, discipline in the club, how assets are looked after, how votes take place at club level, how you manage your income, how you manage your property, every aspect of club. And your role as chairperson, I think, will be enhanced, well, will be protected is a better word, I think, as a result of your knowledge of the club constitution. Particularly for new and newly appointed chairpersons, there's so much support available to you in your role, because so many people are so passionate about the organization, and you will find that you will get support from people who were in the position that you have been in, you are currently in, i.e. former chairpersons, people who currently sit in your executive, You will even find that you will get support from chairpersons of other clubs. Sorry, Sean, do you want to come in there?
I'm just looking at the ones that we have is under 7.2, the executive committee comprises of the chairperson, etc. That comes up to 9 people, okay, and then at least 5 other members. So I mean, like, at least 5 other members. That could be 25 as such. You could show up at the meeting. So I mean, like, I'm just wondering, should it be toned down at, well,
25?
No, it says the executive committee should comprise a chairperson, next day vice person. There's 9 people named, okay, 9 positions named, okay.
Yes, yeah.
And it says then, and at least 5 other full members. So, I mean, like, if you, that would mean, like, that could be 25 members who could show up at the first executive meeting. This is the way we run our club. I say the first executive meeting, any member can come and be voted on the executive once they have a proposer and a seconder. I just want to, my point is, it's too many people, I'm saying, okay, to have. I suppose if it's 5 other members, that's fair enough. That would be 14. But God forbid, like, if 20 people came up, you'd have 20 people plus the 9 officers as such.
Are you saying that has been adopted by your own club?
I'm just newly appointed, and I got a copy of the constitution, so
okay.
There's no date or nothing on this one, okay? But
okay.
Is this a standard one? Is it?
I would say that the number quoted there is to me it's too many. There are many clubs where they wouldn't have that sort of number. There are a number of positions which must be filled, like your chair, your secretary, your treasurer, your registrar. These are positions they're listed on your club constitution. But after that, the club will decide who sits on executive. And it is maybe something that you could take a look at, or maybe a subcommittee might take a look at, and you could bring it in the interim to your current, your new executive, but it would have to be adopted at your next AGM and ratified by the county board.
Okay, thank you.
Problem. We're talking about the other sources available, and the other sources available, it's just, we can't emphasize the support that is available from other members of the association. Your county secretary, it's a very busy role, the role of county secretary, but again, they are available for advice and support. There are some counties where there may be an administrative person available. At central and provincial level, there are members of staff who are available. I have always found the staff in Croke Park to be very keen to help out with any questions that clubs may bring at planning level or even our own level. The TROR, the official guide in the club constitution we've spoken about, again, the TROR is available. It's available to download. The club support manual, an invaluable resource that's available again online, and the learning portal. But just in mentioning that the TROR, the constitution, the club support manual, and the learning portal, can I ask you, just don't be frightened off by the amount of material. When you go on to learning.ga.ie/administration, when you go on there and you see this massive material, don't be put off. Take what you want from it and use it, and you will find some invaluable material. You'll find 1 or 2 pieces of information that will be very useful to you. But don't be put off by what you see when you log on to it first. James's question: what do you do if you have lack of volunteers for key roles on the executive as a result of resignations and no volunteers? Excellent question. Would anybody like to come on and address that, where clubs are struggling to get people involved?
Yeah, Ray, I saw they had a very good document. I think it's maybe 36 pages or that on one of those learning portals I came across about volunteers, volunteer recruitment, volunteer acknowledgement, a couple of things I mentioned earlier. So just to James, go and have a look, find that document, and it covers basically everything about recruitment and retention and appreciation of volunteers.
Yeah. James, your question or your point is it's brought up so often at events like this. and at meetings like this, where sometimes a chairperson is sitting in front of myself or other presenters, and that chairperson has given a lifetime to the club, and nobody else would take on the role. And you can see that they're tired and that they know that the whole year is ahead and they want help. And you feel for them. But it's gone back to a previous slide we had. How do we get people involved? We have to ask them. We ask them, and we try not to intimidate them or frighten them by the amount of work that has to be done. But you're not on your own, James, in that it is difficult at times for clubs, especially smaller clubs, to get people involved and to get people to volunteer. But if you're in a position as a newly elected chairperson, I think you're in a position as a newly elected chairperson to go out there and put your hands up and say to people, look, we need help. We just need help. This club needs help. This community needs help. And I would hope that you would get people to volunteer.
Yeah, that's great. That's just one thing I was just thinking about there too. We're in quite a small rural village, and we have the ladies Gaelic football, the camogie, and the hurling. And it hasn't been broached with other clubs yet, but I'm just wondering if people's experience with the one club idea, because I think it's a real drain on the volunteers switching between the three sort of clubs that are in existence at the moment. And would a one club situation be easier in this sort of a situation, I wonder?
Would anybody like to come in on that?
Yeah, Stephen here, Raymond, Patrick. We actually, Tralee Parnell's hurling and camogie club, we run it as one club, even though there's two separate sets of, I suppose, regulations and administrative bodies. We have one club, one executive, but we have, an equivalent in the camogie club and the hurling club. So it's really going down the route of the one club, given that the club was set up that way from the start, it made it a little bit easy for us. But I don't understand, why clubs wouldn't get together. And it definitely makes, there was a comment earlier about having to get pitches and who gets on a pitch when the hurlers camogie. It makes it a lot easier when everyone's working together, that we're all on the same committee. We all attend the same meeting. We all air our grievances or air our thoughts, and it really does work.
Yeah, it is a difficult issue. Our problem in Castleblaney here is football and hurling. I've tried for years to get the two clubs to come together. It has proved to be virtually impossible. It is a problem. Ladies football and the Castleblaney Folks Club are inextricably linked. They're really one club, and the camogie club is probably closer to the ladies football and the Gaelic football club than the hurling club is. It is a difficult job, but it's well worth pursuing. But as somebody mentioned there, Patrick Ahern, it is an issue that has to be addressed at central level. It has to be addressed at Croke Park. We can constitutionally, it is difficult to bring four clubs under one club. Because they all have their own constitution, they all have their own organising body. So constitutionally, you can't do it. But could you do it from a club management point of view, from a pitch management point of view? It could certainly be a subcommittee of your executive. Okay, Brian is asking about registration. John, would you like to take the registration question? Because it's an important one.
It is an important one. It's not my forte, to be honest with you, Ray. On the registration side of things, I believe a lot of it has gone online now, Brian, at the moment. Having said that, look, I don't want to mislead you in any way. What I'll try and do for you is source out a bit more information on it to give you proper guidance, to be honest.
Thanks, John. That's a very political answer there. It's a very good answer because registration, very important. Registration, as John has said, is online.
Sorry, Ray, I was wondering in terms of the one club.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Because the ladies football club has to be represented, has to be affiliated to Pel Le Mans. The Camogie Club has to be affiliated to the Camogie. And
Raymond, with the new Ferran system, I think it's going to make it far easier that everyone can use Ferran, and the registration will then go down the correct route.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I was just thinking that an obvious carrot to the one club would be if there was a cost benefit to it. And, you know, at the moment we have parents registering their daughters with both the GAA club and the ladies football club at quite a cost, you know. So I've just, I was wondering if any club had went down that route, but obviously not.
With us, from a registration point of view, our girls and the men, it's all one registration. They're all members of Castledenny Falls.
Okay.
So, okay. I hope I haven't frightened you with the learning portal, but it's certainly something I would ask you to reference. The injury benefit fund and insurance policies, the benefits, we know the benefits. Anybody that's been involved in a claim or has had a claim against their club will know the importance of it. It's a self-funded, the injury benefit fund is self-funded, benefit fund funded entirely from the funds, but again, information available on that online. The portal we have mentioned. I think the portal, John has mentioned some of the areas that are going to be developed on the portal. I would just see the portal as something that will develop further as we make our way through January, February, March, because in real terms, with regards to planning, the first 3 months of our year are really the years that are the months that we get things done, because we're involved in this organisation for football, hurling, handball, camogie, ladies football. That's why we're involved in this association, not sitting at meetings. And what we do January, February, March is to make the preparations and have the preparations in place so that our children and our friends in the community have a chance to play and represent their club at a very high level on the best facilities that we can make available to them as club leaders. Just with regards to ICT and IT, it's quite frightening. Just, I don't know about down south, but in the north, it's quite frightening the number of clubs who do not use the Microsoft product that is available free of charge to all GAA clubs. The number of emails and addresses that are available to them, just the suite of resources that are available. I know the association has invested quite an amount of money in this area. You would just hope to see it being used a little bit more and by more clubs than it currently seems to be used. And just, if you're not, and if you haven't accessed the ICT resources available, just to ask you to take a look at that as well. Just to wrap, as a chairperson of a GAA club, and you are a community leader, and it's not necessarily being the front person at the sad events that we have to lead community in, but you are a community leader in so many different ways. The organisation that you're developing, the club that you're developing, is such an integral part to every single community on this island. We have outlined and we've looked at the very varied role and the number of different elements of the role that you have to undertake, and we know that it's not doable on your own, so you have to involve people, you have to delegate to people, you have to look at the subcommittees, and this is a good time of year to take a look at subcommittees and what subcommittees should your club have. We looked at the pitfalls that occur at meetings, the types of people that we have to deal with at meetings, the types of behaviour we have to deal with. We also looked at the Constitution and how important the Constitution is for us as club leaders, that it is a support, that it is a resource. We've looked at the resources that are available to us and the supports that are available. And the most important thing for us all is to know that in this organisation, which is loved by so many people, we're not on our own. And even the club that you would see as your greatest rivals, you will even find support for yourself and your club even within your greatest rivals. So I don't know, we have maybe gone over a little bit I'll hand back to John there. I'm sorry, I had hoped to finish within the 2 hours, but just thank you all for your just the Sport Council grant. Sean, will the deadline stay at the 12th of February? I would think it will stay at the 12th of February. The Sports Council grants don't move that often. Okay, Sinead, John, hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Ray. Thanks very much, folks, for your time and attention. Just before we finish up, I know I had 1 or 2 queries there in relation to coaching content. While there is no interactive seminar at the moment for coaching and games, I'm happy to take that information back to Crow Park to start looking at that. But just in your chat box there on the side, I have shared a link to the Munster GAA website where you will find some additional coaching supports. It's very much video vlogs is what they would be known in the current climate, I suppose, of different coaches that were out and about, and content that is recorded and is quite useful. But like I said at the start, the time is definitely coming where you put an extra emphasis on e-learning, and in particular in relation to coaching and games as well. The final link I'm going to share with you as well, folks, in the chat box is just a link in relation to feedback for tonight's seminar. It's not essential for people to fill it in, but if you do have a moment and would like to take the time just to fill out that application form, it's just on feedback and how the night went. We'd be happy to take that information off you as well. And that's just in the chat box there for you now as well, folks. That's pretty much it, folks. Other than that, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us here this evening. And I'd open the floor to any final questions before we conclude. Everyone seems happy enough, folks. Again, thanks very much, folks, for your time this evening. It was great to have you. And just a final word of thank you to Ray for the excellent presentation. Well done, Ray. Your experience is very valuable, and it's very much appreciated for presenting here this evening. Thank you very much,
Not
Ray.
a problem, John, and thank you all. Thank you all for, you know, it's very difficult sitting on a chair in Monaghan, presenting to people throughout Munster, but it was great, the feedback that came back. And maybe as we roll out these meetings, maybe if you continue to do what you did tonight, it was really great to get the feedback and to have that interaction over such a distance. I really appreciate it, and the best of luck to you all in the really important job that you do. I hope you all win the championship, and many championships. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Ray.
Thank you.
Slán go fáil, folks.
Slán.
Thank you.
Slán.
Thanks, folks.